the day after the attack on the Mavi Marmara, Israel kept saying in its defense, we didn't expect violent resistance. We didn't expect they would use force against us. We thought that we would just land on the boat and we would have, to use their word, a conversation with the nonviolent resistors on the deck. We were shocked that they resorted to force. How many people remember that? Raise your hand. Okay. But then an obvious question comes to mind. If Israel didn't expect force to be used against it, then why didn't it board the boat in broad daylight? Why did it launch the attack at 4:30 a.m.? Why did it launch the attack using stun grenades and tear gas and maybe plastic bullets? If they didn't expect any resistance, they could have just boarded the boats in broad daylight and even brought along many journalists to show the world their peaceful intentions. If Israel didn't expect violence or intend violence, why did it deploy a commando unit trained to kill and not a police unit accustomed to handling civil resistors? The reasonable inference is that Israel wanted a bloody confrontation, although almost certainly not on the scale that ensued after the Israeli commandos panicked at the passengers' determined resistance, and then the commandos exacted more deaths. That's basically what happened as far as we can tell so far. But the more fraught political question is where we're headed. Because as I said at the beginning of my remarks, Israel has now suffered a succession of military defeats, bungled commando operations, and the Mavi Marmara was really the climax of all of these disasters for Israel. After the Mavi Marmara, the Israeli commentators said, it was a disgraceful fiasco, a national humiliation. Our deterrence took a bad blow. It wasn't a fiasco because 9 passengers were killed. That's just an irrelevance. It was a disaster because of how the commandos, the Israeli commandos, acquitted themselves. It happens that those naval commandos, which rappelled onto the deck of the Mavi Marmara, they're Israel's best fighting unit. They are the equivalent of the American naval SEALs. They are Israel's elite fighting force, the creme de la creme of the Israeli Defense Forces. I don't think Canada has an equivalent of the naval SEALs, though I'm sure Mr. Harper and Mr. Kenny are staying up nights trying to figure out how to create an equivalent. And actually, personally, I wouldn't mind if Mr. Harper enlists in his own naval SEALs, so long as he's not given an oxygen tank. I know, that's American humor. Canadians are too civilized. We appreciate that. Well, it happens that there were 30 Israeli naval SEALs that rappelled onto the deck of the Mavi Marmara. And by coincidence, they faced off almost in exactly the same number of Turkish civilian passengers who had only makeshift weapons. 30 against 30, and before you knew it, 3 of the Israelis had been captured. Israel's elite unit. A former U.S. Marine who had been involved in the capture of 2 of the 3 commandos. He later said, "They looked like frightened children in the face of an abusive father." They looked like frightened children in the face of an abusive father. Well, you may laugh, but Israel is surely not laughing. That's not the image they want to project to their foe or their friend of the Israeli army. One Israeli general said, "It's one thing for people to think we're crazy, that's okay. But it's bad when they think we're incompetent and crazy." And that may sound funny as well, but it has very ominous implications, because Israel is now more desperate than ever to restore its deterrence capacity, the Arab world's fear of it. It needs to do so because of the succession of military defeats, bungled commando operations, and then this growing coalition now seeming to include this character, Mr. Erdogan from Turkey. Where did Turkey come from? That was supposed to be Israel's main ally in the Muslim world. And now this character, Erdogan, he's got this weird idea that Turkey is important. He goes to this Davos summit, and in the public, he starts telling the Israeli president, Shimon Peres, that the Israeli army is filled with killers. Then he joins forces with the head of state of Brazil to try to achieve a diplomatic resolution of the problems with Iran. These Arabs, these Muslims, they're getting just too big for their britches. It's time to cut them down to size. And judging by the most recent reports, knowledgeable reports, the place Israel intends to do so is once again in Lebanon. The former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Daniel Kurtzer, he recently authored a study, and he said that Israel will likely attack Lebanon in the next 12 to 18 months. He said, or Israel has said, that it will do to Lebanon what it did to Gaza in 2008-9. Are there any folks in this room from Lebanon? Raise your hand. Just a few. For those of you from Lebanon, you'll know the area, the south suburb of Beirut, called the Dahya. The Dahya is populated mostly by poor Shia civilians supportive of Hezbollah, and during the 2006 war, Israel turned the Dahya into a parking lot. There was nothing left there except for the craters in the ground. Israel was very pleased with what it had accomplished in Lebanon, or I should say in the Dahya, so much so that they coined a new term. It's called the Dahya Doctrine. And basically it means using massive force against civilians and civilian infrastructure. They first tested the Dahya Doctrine in Gaza, but they've said they intend to do it again in the next war. On one point, Israel and its chief nemesis, Hezbollah, agree. Israel says the next war, and now I'm quoting it, will be game-changing. the head of Hezbollah, Sayed Nasrallah, he says the next war will change the face of this region. Mr. Nasrallah has said in a series of speeches this past year, over and over again, he said, the next war will be a tit-for-tat war. An airport for an airport, a port for a port, a city for a city, a building for a building, a power station for a power station, a factory for a factory. Now, whether you like Mr. Nasrallah or not, we can all agree that his entire reputation, and he knows it, rests on the fact that there's an exact correspondence between his words and his deeds. That is, there's every reason to suppose that Nasrallah means what he says and will, in fact, must do what he promises. And then you have to ask yourself, what will Israel do if Hezbollah missiles start targeting Tel Aviv and massive civilian casualties begin to accumulate? The prospect grows yet more terrifying when you bear in mind that true, everything I've said so far is speculative, and I'm the first one to concede it, and I'm the first one to say, I surely hope I'm wrong. But there's one point which is not speculative. There is no possible way Israel will accept another defeat in Lebanon. That is impossible. If it appears as if a defeat is impending, then Israel will do what it has to do to make sure it will not be defeated. And I do not believe at that point even the US can stop it. On the other hand, I do not believe that if it appears as if a Hezbollah defeat is impending, I do not believe Iran will sit by quietly. Not because of any sense of solidarity, but because of self-interest. Because Iran knows if Hezbollah is defeated, that they're the next ones in line. In 2006, it was perfectly understood by everyone that the attack on Lebanon by Israel was a prelude to the attack on Iran. As it happened, Iran didn't have to enter the picture because Hezbollah won. But this time, if it looks as if Hezbollah is losing, Iran will for certain, or not for certain, but quite likely, will enter. In short, an Israeli attack on Hezbollah would trigger a chain reaction, the outcome of which, as I said, no sane person would want to contemplate.